The diary was under my pillow where I always left it, navy blue cover, pages swollen from years of pressed flowers and tear stains. I came home early that Tuesday because orchestra practice was cancelled, walked into my room, and found my mother standing by the trash can with ashes on her fingertips. "What are you doing?" My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. She didn't even look guilty, just tired. "Sienna, you're 17. This obsession with writing everything down, it's not healthy. Your sister doesn't need a diary to be happy." That was mine. I moved toward the trash can, but there was nothing left to save, just grey flakes and the metal spiral binding, twisted and blackened. "You had no right." "I had every right. I'm your mother." She wiped her hands on her jeans. "Besides, it was full of such dramatic nonsense. Nobody sees me. Everyone loves Emma more. You think I don't know what you write? You think those words don't hurt me?" My throat closed. She'd been reading it. For how long? "Emma needed that space on your shelf for her trophies anyway," she continued, already walking past me. "You'll thank me later. Sometimes we need to let go of things that keep us stuck." I stood there watching ash float in the air where my entire life had been. 6 years of entries. First period, first heartbreak, the day Dad forgot my birthday but took Emma to get her driving permit early as a surprise, the night I got into the state writing competition, but they couldn't come because Emma had a volleyball match. Every invisible moment I'd existed in this house, documented and dated, all of it gone. I looked at my shelf. Emma's volleyball trophies gleamed in a neat row where my books used to be. Golden girls frozen mid-spike, celebrating victories my parents had actually shown up to watch. That night at dinner, nobody mentioned it. Dad asked Emma about college applications. Mum reminded her to call Grandma because she had asked about her specifically. I moved rice around my plate and said nothing. When you're used to being quiet, people stop noticing when you go completely silent. 2 weeks later, Julian came over for a study session. He was Emma's boyfriend first, met him at one of her games, started dating him 3 months ago. But lately, he'd been staying after Emma went to volleyball practice, helping me with calculus, asking about my writing. "You seem different," he said that afternoon, sitting too close on the couch. "Lighter, somehow." I wasn't lighter, I was hollow, but I smiled because that's what you do when someone finally notices you exist. "Maybe I'm just finally growing up," I said. His hand found my knee. "I like it. You're not as intense as you used to be." I should have moved his hand, should have remembered he was Emma's, but when you've spent your whole life being second choice, even borrowed attention feels like sunlight. We kissed 3 times before Emma came home. He left quickly, casually, like nothing had happened. And maybe for him, nothing had. But I went to my room and reached for my diary before remembering. No diary to confess to. No pages to hold my guilt. Just me and the secret and the hollow space where my words used to live. It happened again 2 days later. And then again. Julian started texting me when Emma was at practice. Sweet things, careful things. "You're easier to talk to than she is. You actually listen." Sometimes I think I picked the wrong sister. I knew it was wrong. But wrong felt like the only attention I'd ever been given freely, without having to watch Emma receive it first and better. Emma found out on a Thursday. She came into my room without knocking, phone in hand, Julian's text glowing on the screen. "You?" Her voice shook. "You, of all people?" "Emma, I defended you. When Mom said you were jealous, when Dad said you needed to try harder to be more like me, I defended you. I told them you were just different, that you had your own path." She was crying now, and I'd never seen Emma cry. "And this is what you do?" "I'm sorry." "No, you're not sorry. You're just caught." She stepped closer, and for the first time in our lives, I saw something other than confidence in her face. I saw betrayal, real, raw, and bleeding. "I'm telling them. They need to know what you really are." She did. That night, the entire family gathered in the living room like some kind of intervention. Emma sat between Mum and Dad, still crying. Julian wasn't there. Of course not. Boys like him never stayed for the consequences. "How could you do this to your sister?" Mum's voice was cold and factual. "After everything we've done for you, after all the opportunities we've given you." "What opportunities?" The words came out before I could stop them. "When have you ever... Don't you dare." Dad's voice cut through mine. "We've fed you, clothed you, paid for your school. Emma works hard for what she has. She earns her place. You..." He stopped, but the words hung there anyway. "You've never earned anything." "I'm sorry," I whispered, because what else was there to say? "Sorry doesn't fix this," Mum said. "Emma can't even look at you. You've broken this family, Sienna. You've broken your sister's heart." They sent me to my room. I heard them comforting Emma downstairs for hours, heard Mum making her favourite tea, heard Dad promise they'd get her into therapy if she needed it. All the support I'd never received for any pain I'd carried poured into her because her hurt was visible and mine never had been. I lay on my bed staring at the trophies that weren't mine and felt nothing. Not guilt, not grief, just a recognition that I'd finally confirmed what they'd always believed, that Emma was the good one and I was the mistake. The next month was silent warfare. Emma stopped speaking to me entirely. Mum looked through me like I was glass. Dad worked late more often. I moved through the house like a ghost, attending school, doing homework, existing in the margins the way I always had, but now with an official reason for being ignored. Julian posted photos with a new girl within 2 weeks. Emma cried about it once, then moved on to a boy from her college prep class, taller, kinder, more present. Her pain had a shelf life because people cared enough to help her heal. Mine just accumulated. I stopped eating much. Not intentionally, just because nobody noticed if I did or didn't. Breakfast was eaten alone. Dinner became optional. When I started losing weight, Mum commented once, "At least something good is coming from this. You're finally fitting into normal sizes." That was the moment something inside me calcified into something cold and permanent. 3 months after the diary burning, I walked home from school in the rain because I'd missed the bus. Nobody answered when I called. By the time I got home, I was soaked and shivering. Emma was in the kitchen making cookies with Mum, both of them laughing about something. They looked up when I came in, dripping on the tile. "Sienna, you're getting water everywhere," Mum said. "Go change." Not, "Are you okay?" or "Let me get you a towel." Just criticism for existing inconveniently in their space. I went upstairs, changed into dry clothes, lay down on my bed, and something in me just stopped trying. I stopped going down for meals. When they didn't come looking, I knew. I stopped turning in homework. When teachers called home and nobody mentioned it to me, I knew. I stopped answering texts from the few friends I had. When they stopped trying after a week, I knew. I was only real when I was a problem. When I was quiet and small and fading, I was forgettable. The pneumonia started as a cough I didn't bother mentioning. It bloomed into fever I treated with old medicine from the bathroom cabinet. By the time I couldn't get out of bed, it had been 3 days since anyone had checked on me. Emma knocked once, needing to borrow something, saw me there pale and sweating, and hesitated. "Are you sick?" I didn't answer. Couldn't, really, my throat was too raw. She stood there for a moment longer, then left. I heard her tell Mum I looked kind of off, but that was it. No one came to check. That night, the fever spiked and the world started folding in strange directions. I heard sounds that weren't there, felt the bed sinking. Time moved like honey, slow and thick and suffocating. I thought about the diary, about all those words I'd written that no one would ever read now, about all the moments I'd documented that were just gone, as if they'd never happened, as if I'd never happened. The realization came with a strange peace. Maybe that was the point. Maybe some people were only meant to be rough drafts, something for the real story to contrast against. Emma was the story. I was just the margin notes no one bothered keeping. My last thought before the darkness came was surprisingly simple. At least, I won't have to keep being invisible. Then, nothing. Then, everything. I opened my eyes to my ceiling, but it was different. The trophies were gone. My books were back. The posters I'd taken down sophomore year were still up, faded and curling at the edges. I sat up slowly. My chest didn't hurt. My throat was clear. I looked at my hands. Smaller, younger. The scar on my thumb from cooking class junior year was gone. My phone buzzed. The date read September 3rd. 4 years ago. The week before high school started. I knew immediately what this was. I'd read enough stories, written enough of my own, to recognize the narrative structure. Second chance. Rebirth. Do-over. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. And I was 13 again, with 17 years of memory burning clear and bitter in my mind. I got out of bed and walked to my mirror. Young face, uncertain eyes, all that pain still ahead of me unless I changed it. And I would. I absolutely would. But not the way I'd done it before. This time I wouldn't fight for scraps of their attention. Wouldn't break myself trying to fit into spaces they'd never make for me anyway. This time I would simply stop participating in my own erasure. I heard Mum calling Emma down for breakfast. Then, as an afterthought, "Sienna, you too." I went downstairs, but everything felt different now, sharper. I saw the way Mum plated Emma's food with care and slid mine across the counter absently. Saw Dad look up at Emma with pride and through me with vague acknowledgement. Saw Emma smile, completely unaware that she lived in sunlight while I existed in her shadow. But none of it hurt anymore, because I knew how this story ended if I kept playing my assigned role. And I was choosing a different script. "Sienna, are you excited for high school?" Dad asked, refilling Emma's orange juice without asking if I wanted any. "Sure," I said. Simple, neutral. I'd learned in my first life that enthusiasm was just another thing they could ignore or redistribute to Emma. "Emma's going to help you navigate your first week, aren't you, Emma?" My sister nodded generously. "Of course. I'll introduce you to people, show you around." In my first life, I'd been grateful. Trailed after her like a shadow, met her friends, existed as Emma's little sister. I thought she was helping me. Now I understood she was just extending her territory, making sure even my social circle reflected her influence. "That's okay," I said. "I'll figure it out myself." Mum looked up. "Don't be difficult, Sienna. Emma's trying to help." "I know. I just want to try things on my own first." The small rebellion registered as surprise in Emma's face, brief disappointment in Mum's, but they moved on quickly because I wasn't actually important enough to argue about. I finished breakfast in silence and went back to my room. My diary sat on my desk, pristine and new. Navy, blue cover, empty pages. I picked it up and felt its weight. All those future words I wouldn't write now. All those poured out feelings I wouldn't waste on pages they'd eventually burn. I put it in the back of my closet, behind old games and outgrown clothes. This time I would keep my thoughts to myself. Let them wonder. Let them assume. But never again would I hand them a map to my interior life so they could dismiss it as dramatic nonsense. High school started, and I did exactly what I said, figured it out myself. Joined the creative writing club Emma had never touched. Made friends with quiet kids who lived in the books instead of sports. Built a life in the margin she'd never claimed. And every time Mum asked why I wasn't more involved, wasn't more social, wasn't more like Emma. I just smiled and said I was happy. Because arguing required them to care about my answer, and they never actually did. The first few months passed in a strange double vision. I'd walk into the cafeteria and know exactly where Julian would be sitting in 2 years. I'd watch Emma at volleyball practice and remember which game would get her scouted. I'd sit through family dinners and hear echoes of conversations that hadn't happened yet. But the strangest part was watching my parents interact with the version of me they thought they knew. They'd make comments about my sensitivity, my dramatics, my jealousy, all based on a future I was systematically dismantling. I was becoming someone they couldn't predict, and their confusion manifested as vague concern they never quite acted on. "Sienna seems different lately," I heard Mum tell Dad one night. I was in the hallway, about to head downstairs for water. "Different how?" "I don't know. Quieter, more closed off. She used to tell me everything." I almost laughed. I'd never told her everything. I'd written everything in a diary she'd later burn, but I'd never actually spoken the words. She'd just assumed my silence meant I had nothing to say. "Maybe she's just becoming a teenager," Dad said. "They get moody." Emma didn't. Of course, Emma didn't. Emma had never needed to protect herself from her own family. I went back to my room without the water. 3 months in, Mom came into my room looking for something. "Sienna, have you seen Emma's—" She stopped, looking around. "Your room is so empty. Where are all your things?" "What things?" "You know, posters, decorations, personal items. Emma's room looks lived in. Yours looks like a hotel." "Because I'm not leaving evidence for you to destroy again," I thought. Out loud I said, "I guess I'm just minimal." She frowned like this was another small disappointment to file away, then left. I'd learned in my first life that anything I loved could be taken away to make room for Emma's success. So this time I kept my treasures invisible. Library books I returned on time, documents saved in cloud drives, friends they never met, dreams I never mentioned. Winter came in with it, the holiday season. Extended family visited for whole Thanksgiving, and I watched the familiar dynamics play out like a script I'd memorized. Aunt Linda praising Emma's grades, Uncle Robert asking Emma about her sports, Grandma showing everyone Emma's latest achievement on her phone, and then, as always, someone remembered I existed. "And Sienna, how's school going for you?" Aunt Linda asked, the question feeling like an obligation. "Good. I'm enjoying my writing class." "Writing? That's nice. Emma, didn't you win that essay contest last year?" The conversation pivoted back to Emma before I could answer. In my first life, this pattern had felt like drowning. Now it just felt expected. I excused myself early and spent the rest of the evening in my room, reading. Emma came up later, knocking softly. "You okay? You left kind of abruptly." "I'm fine, just tired." She sat on my bed uninvited. "Mom thinks you're being antisocial." "Mom thinks a lot of things about me that aren't true." "What does that mean?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. 16, beautiful, confident, completely unaware of the privileges she swam in. In my first life, I'd resented her. Now I just felt a distant sort of pity. She'd never have to develop the survival skills invisibility taught you. "It means I'm fine, Emma. You don't need to check on me." "But I want to. You're my sister." "Am I?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Or am I just the person who happens to live in the same house as you?" She looked genuinely hurt. "That's not fair." Maybe it wasn't, but fairness was a luxury I'd stopped expecting. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just tired." She left, confused and a little wounded, and I felt nothing. I'd used up all my emotional energy on this family in my first life. This time, I was conserving it for myself. Julian transferred to our school in November, just like before. I watched Emma notice him at the volleyball game, watched the same attraction bloom. But this time, when he looked at me, I looked away. Emma brought him home for dinner in December. He was charming and polite, complimented Mum's cooking, asked Dad about work, and after Emma went to get dessert, he turned to me. "You're Emma's sister, right? Sienna." "Right." "You're quiet. I like that. Emma's great, but she's a lot sometimes. You know?" I knew this script. I'd lived it. This was where I was supposed to feel seen, feel special, feel like maybe someone preferred me for once. Instead, I just smiled politely and said nothing. His interest sharpened at the resistance. Over the next month, he found reasons to talk to me at school, helped me with calculus I already understood, asked about my writing. All the same moves, the same playbook, and I let none of it land. "You're hard to read," he said one day, frustrated after I'd politely declined his offer to study together. "Maybe I'm just not very interesting," I replied, gathering my books. "That's not what I meant. I know what you meant, but I'm not interested in being your backup plan when my sister gets boring." His face flushed. "That's not... I wasn't..." "Yes, you were. And in a few months, when this doesn't work out with Emma, you'll try again, and I'll still say no." I walked away, leaving him standing there. It felt good. Better than good. It felt like rewriting history with intention instead of just surviving it. He didn't know what to do with that. Boys like Julian needed the chase to feel real, but they also needed the prey to run in predictable patterns. I'd learned that participating in my own harm just because it felt like attention was the saddest kind of self-betrayal. So, I didn't participate. By February, he'd stopped trying. By March, he and Emma were solid, posting couple photos, making plans, and I felt nothing but relief that I'd rewritten that chapter before it could leave scars. Emma came into my room one night, happy and glowing. "Julian said something sweet today. He said he's glad I'm not complicated like some girls, that I'm straightforward and easy to understand." She flopped on my bed. "Isn't that nice?" "Very nice," I said, not looking up from my book. "You don't sound excited for me." "I am. I'm just reading." She studied me for a long moment. "You've been weird this year. Different." "Different how?" "Just distant. Like you're not really here even when you're here, and you're always reading. You used to want to hang out with me and my friends, now you just disappear." "Because I'm not chasing crumbs of your attention anymore," I thought. "Because I learned that your world only has room for you, and I'm building my own." "I'm just focused on my own stuff," I said. "What stuff? You never talk about anything. You never tell me what you're thinking. It's like you're a stranger." Maybe I was. Maybe I'd always been a stranger, and she was only now noticing, because I'd stopped our performing familiarity. "I'm fine, Emma. Really. I'm just growing up." She left looking puzzled, and I knew that in her mind, my emotional distance was just another quirk of her weird little sister. She couldn't conceive that I was choosing this, that I was protecting myself from a family that had already shown me my value, or lack thereof. Spring came, and with it, the anniversary of the diary burning. I marked it privately, a small acknowledgement of the turning point that had destroyed me in one life and saved me in this one. Mum came into my room in April, and I knew immediately what day it was. The same week, the same time. She was looking for something to donate, just like before. "Sienna, I'm cleaning out some things. Do you have anything you're not using anymore?" "I keep things pretty minimal," I said. "You can check my closet if you want." She did. Found the old diary buried in the back. Pulled it out, and I watched her face carefully. This was the moment. The catalyst that had proven to younger me that my thoughts weren't safe. That my family would destroy what they didn't understand. She opened it, flipped through pages. Her frown deepened as she realized they were completely empty. Not a single word written in years. "This is blank," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "I know." "You haven't written anything? Not one entry?" "No." Something flickered across her face. Confusion, concern, maybe even hurt. But you used to write constantly. I remember you always had this with you. You loved this diary. Did I? I kept my voice neutral. I don't really remember. That was a lie. I remembered everything. Every word I'd poured into those pages in my first life. Every secret she'd burned. Every vulnerability she'd dismissed as dramatic nonsense. Well, she said finally, still holding the empty book like it might explain something. Emma needs more space for her trophies anyway. I'm going to clear this shelf. Okay. She paused at the door. Sienna, are you happy? The question caught me off guard. She'd never asked before, in either life. Why wouldn't I be? You just seem, I don't know, somewhere else, like you're here, but not really here. I'm here, I said. Maybe you're just finally noticing. She didn't understand that. I could see it in her face. But she didn't push, because pushing would require an emotional investment she'd never been willing to make in me. She left with the empty diary. I heard her in the hallway speaking to Dad in a low voice. Something's wrong with Sienna. She's too, I don't know, quiet. She's always been quiet. Not like this. This is different. This is like she's built a wall. I had built a wall, brick by brick, made of all the moments they'd looked through me instead of at me. And it was high enough now that they couldn't reach over it, even if they'd wanted to. Which they didn't. Not really. They just wanted to understand why I wasn't performing the role of grateful, eager younger sister anymore. But they didn't pursue it, because pursuing it would require effort they'd never been willing to spend on me. So I remained quiet and different and safely unknown behind my wall. Junior year rolled into senior year. College applications came. Emma applied to prestigious universities with their full support, application fees paid, essays reviewed by hired consultants, campus visits planned like family vacations. I applied to schools they'd never heard of, using fee waivers and writing my own essays. I spent hours in the library researching programs, crafting applications, pouring myself into personal statements that would actually be read by people who might see value in me. When I got into an excellent creative writing program halfway across the country with a full scholarship, I told them at dinner. That's wonderful, Sienna, Mum said, with the same enthusiasm she'd use for someone announcing they'd organised the garage. Where is it again? Dad asked, already reaching for his phone. Oregon. It's a small program, but highly ranked for creative writing. Oregon, he repeated, like I'd said Mars. That's very far. I know. Are there no good schools closer to home? Emma's staying in state. It would be nice to have both our girls nearby. Would it? I wanted to ask. Would you even notice if I was nearby or not? Emma looked up from her phone. You're really going that far away? I got a full scholarship. It's a great program. But... She stopped, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before in either life. Uncertainty, maybe even sadness. But I thought you'd go somewhere near me. I thought we'd still see each other on weekends and stuff. And for just a moment, I felt the old softness toward her. Emma wasn't cruel, just unconscious. She'd never had to notice my pain because everyone had always cushioned hers. She genuinely believed we were close because she'd never had to work for connection with me. I'd always just been there, orbiting her son. You'll be busy with your own school? I said gently. You'll barely notice I'm gone. That's not true. But Mum interrupted with something about Emma's scholarship to her first choice school, and the moment passed. Just like always. Emma's feelings, Emma's future, Emma's everything, taking up all the oxygen in the room. I excused myself and went upstairs, and nobody called me back. The rest of senior year unfolded predictably. Emma thrived, dating Julian and accumulating achievements like trophies. I existed in the margins, writing stories they never asked to read, building friendships they never met, preparing for a future they didn't seem curious about. They celebrated Emma's acceptance to her top choice school with a party. My scholarship got a "that's nice, honey" at breakfast, and I felt nothing but readiness to leave. Graduation came. At the ceremony, they cheered loudly when Emma's name was called, holding up signs and taking dozens of photos. When my name was called, they clapped politely. I saw Dad checking his phone. At the family dinner afterward, they toasted Emma's achievements: volleyball captain, Honour Society president, full scholarship to a prestigious university. My name got mentioned in passing, an afterthought attached to Emma's celebration. "Both our girls graduating," Mum said, raising her glass. "We're so proud of Emma's accomplishments, and, of course, Sienna will be going to college too." Of course, as if my full scholarship to a competitive program was just a footnote to Emma's story. I smiled through it all because I was days away from freedom, and their inability to see me no longer had the power to wound. The night before I left for college, Emma came to my room. I was packing the last of my things. Not much, since I'd kept my life small enough to fit in 2 suitcases. "Can I come in?" "Sure." She sat on my bed, watching me fold clothes with that same uncertain expression. "Are you excited?" "Yeah." "You're not going to miss us?" I paused, holding one of my few favourite sweaters. Here was the moment for honesty or continued peace. I chose honesty because what did it matter now? "I'll miss the idea of you," I said carefully. "But the reality, not as much as you think." She flinched. "What does that mean?" "It means I've spent my whole life being invisible in this house, Emma. And I'm tired, so I'm going somewhere I can actually be seen." "That's not fair. We see you. Do you?" I turned to face her fully, and maybe she saw something in my expression that made her go still. "Tell me 3 things I care about. 3 things that actually matter to me. Not surface facts like where I go to school or what grade I'm in, but real things about who I am as a person." She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Nothing came. "You can't, can you? Because none of you have ever actually looked at me long enough to see me. I've just been the other daughter, the not Emma, the quiet one, the one who doesn't need as much attention because she doesn't demand it." "That's not true, Emma." When was the last time Mum or Dad came to any event of mine? When was the last time they asked about my friends, my writing, my dreams? When was the last time I was more than an afterthought in this family? Tears started falling down her face. "I didn't know. I really didn't know it was like that for you." "I know. That's the problem. You didn't have to know. You've never had to see me because I've never been positioned to matter. You've been swimming in privilege so complete, you couldn't even see the water." "I'm sorry. I know. But sorry doesn't give me back the years I spent believing I was the problem. Sorry doesn't rewrite the fact that I've been loved conditionally while you've been loved automatically. Sorry doesn't fix what's already broken." She was fully crying now, and part of me, the part that remembered being sisters before being rivals, wanted to comfort her. But I'd spent too many years comforting myself while they comforted her. I was done. "What do I do?" she asked through tears. "How do I fix this?" "You don't. I do, by leaving and building a life where I'm not constantly reminded of everything I'm not. Will you come back? For holidays and stuff?" I considered lying, but what was the point? "Maybe. But, Emma, I'm not coming back for you or them. If I come back, it'll be for me. To see if I can sit at that table without feeling invisible. And if I can't, I won't come. I'm done sacrificing my peace for other people's comfort." She left my room still crying. I heard her telling Mum, heard Mum's voice rising with concern, heard her footsteps coming toward my room. She stopped outside my door. I waited, but she never knocked. Whatever Emma had said wasn't enough to make them actually confront what they had done, and I hadn't expected it to be. The next morning, Dad drove me to the airport. The ride was long and quiet. I watched familiar streets give way to highway, highway to airport, old life to new life. "You know we love you," he said as we pulled up to departures, the words awkward in his mouth. "I know you believe that," I replied, pulling my bags from the trunk. "But love without attention is just empty words. Love without effort is just obligation. And I'm done accepting obligation as affection." He looked like I'd slapped him. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Sienna, that's not... We never meant... I know you didn't mean it. That's almost worse. If you'd done it on purpose, at least I could hate you. But you just didn't notice. And you still don't." "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It's not fair. But it's true." I hugged him briefly, not coldly, but not warmly either. A gesture of goodbye that held no promise of return. "Take care of yourself, Dad. And maybe..." I hesitated, then decided to say it. "Maybe pay attention to why I'm leaving. Really think about it. Not about what you meant to do, but what you actually did." I walked into the airport without looking back, and for the first time in both my lives, I felt completely free. College was everything I'd hoped, and more. Professors who knew my name by the second week. Friends who chose me first, not as an afterthought to someone more interesting. Writing workshops where my words mattered, where people listened with intent instead of obligation. I built a life there that was wholly mine, unstained by comparison or neglect. I wrote stories about invisible girls who learned to see themselves. I made friends who asked questions and waited for answers. I fell in love briefly with a boy who thought my quietness was depth instead of damage, and when it ended, I survived it without needing anyone to save me. I came home for Thanksgiving freshman year, mostly because I felt like I should try. But nothing had changed. The dinner table still revolved around Emma, her new college experiences, her new boyfriend, her summer internship prospects. When I mentioned my work being published in the university literary magazine, Mum said, "That's nice," and immediately asked Emma about her sorority. I left after 2 days, claiming I had work to finish for class. Dad looked relieved. Mum looked guilty, but didn't stop me. Emma walked me to my car. "I wish you'd stay longer," she said. "Why? So you can feel better about ignoring me for another 2 days." "I'm not ignoring you. You are. You all are. The same way you always have. I'm just the only one who stopped pretending it wasn't happening." I drove away and didn't come back for Christmas. Made excuses about work, about internships, about anything that sounded reasonable enough that they wouldn't push. They didn't push. I think they were relieved. Emma called sometimes, tried to maintain sisterhood long distance through texts and occasional phone calls. I kept things friendly, but shallow, answering questions without offering information, present but not available. She'd gotten engaged to some finance, and guy she met through friends was working in marketing at a firm Mum and Dad helped her get into through connections, lived in a nice apartment they'd helped furnish, driving a reliable car they'd helped purchase. Her life continued on its golden trajectory, while mine diverged into something smaller, but entirely mine. And I preferred mine. I absolutely preferred mine. 3 years after graduation, I published my first novel, a quiet book about complicated family dynamics and the specific loneliness of being unloved in a house full of people. It got modest but meaningful attention, a few good reviews, a small but devoted readership who saw themselves in the invisible girl who'd learnt to save herself. Mum called when she saw it mentioned in a magazine at her book club. "Sienna, we saw your book. We didn't even know you were writing a novel." "I told you, at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, and in the Christmas card I sent." And in the email I sent when I signed with my agent. A pause. Oh, well, we must have... Anyway, we bought a copy. We're so proud of you. Proud. The word felt hollow, arriving years too late, offered with the same casual enthusiasm as commenting on good weather. Thanks, I said. It's not about us, is it? Emma seemed worried when she read the description. Some of the reviews mentioned family dynamics and there it was. Even my success had to be vetted for potential embarrassment to them. It's fiction, I said, inspired by common human experiences, not specific people or events. She sounded relieved. Good. We wouldn't want people getting the wrong idea about our family. You know how people talk. We talked for 5 more minutes about nothing substantial, and then I let her go. She probably thought it was a good conversation. She probably told Dad I'd called, that I sounded good, that the book thing was nice. She probably didn't notice that I'd never asked how they were, never asked about Emma, never offered to visit. She probably didn't notice because she never really had. Emma called an hour later. I read it, she said. The whole thing, in one sitting. And? It's beautiful and heartbreaking and... Sienna, her voice cracked. I'm so sorry for all of it, for not seeing, for not understanding, for being the reason you felt invisible. You weren't the reason, Emma. You were just the contrast that made it visible. The problem was never that they loved you. It was that loving you seemed to use up all their capacity for loving anyone. I've been thinking about what you said before you left for college, that I couldn't name 3 things about you. I've been trying to learn, to actually see you instead of just assuming we were close because we're sisters. And I can name them now. You write in the morning when your mind is clearest. You prefer tea to coffee. You keep your emotional life private because you learned early that sharing it meant watching it get dismissed or destroyed. You choose small, meaningful things over large gestures. You value honesty even when it's uncomfortable. Her voice broke again. You deserved better than what we gave you. Better than what I gave you. Something in my chest loosened slightly. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Thank you for seeing that, I said quietly. Is it too late? She asked. Can we start over? Real sisters this time, not just people who share DNA and a childhood home? I thought about it. About the girl who'd burned from invisibility. About the woman I'd become through choosing myself first. About whether there was room in my life for a relationship with someone who'd been complicit in my erasure, even if that complicity had been unconscious. Maybe, I said finally. But Emma, this time I need you to meet me where I am. I'm not coming back to that house pretending everything is fine. I'm not sitting at that table being ignored while everyone celebrates you. If you want a relationship with me, it's on my terms. Here, in my life, in my world. Okay, she said without hesitation. I can do that. I want to do that. And slowly, carefully, she did. Visited me in Oregon without our parents, just the 2 of us trying to rebuild something that had never actually existed before. Met my friends without comparing them to hers. Read my work without making it about her, asked real questions and actually listened to real answers. Learned who I was instead of assuming she already knew. It wasn't perfect. Some conversations still carried the weight of our history, the ghost of the family dynamics that had shaped us both. But it was genuine in a way nothing between us had ever been before. Mum and Dad never made that journey. They stayed comfortable in their version of events, where they'd done their best and I'd just been difficult, distant, different. When I didn't come home for holidays, they told people I was busy with my writing career. When I won awards, they mentioned it to friends like interesting trivia, not with pride, but with mild surprise. And I let them. Their approval no longer mattered because I'd found something infinitely better. My own approval. My own peace, my own life written in words they would never burn because they would never be allowed close enough to touch them. 5 years after leaving home, I was in my small house in Oregon, working on my third novel, when I got an email from a reader. "Your books saved my life," she wrote. "I was the invisible daughter too, the one whose diary got thrown away, whose achievements got overshadowed, whose pain got dismissed. Reading your words made me feel seen for the first time in my entire life. Thank you for writing what I couldn't say. Thank you for showing me it was possible to survive and build something beautiful from the ashes." I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. This was why I'd survived, why I'd been reborn. Not to get revenge on my family or force them to finally see me, but to see myself clearly enough to survive, and then to write it down so other invisible girls might find the words for their own silence. I thought about that empty diary Mum had found all those years ago, how confused she'd been by the blank pages, how she'd expected evidence of the dramatic, jealous girl she'd decided I was based on her own guilt and discomfort. She'd never understood that my silence was the most powerful thing I'd ever written, that refusing to give them access to my interior life was how I'd protected myself. That blank pages weren't emptiness, they were boundaries. They were survival. They were me finally learning that some people didn't deserve to witness your becoming. This time, I wrote everything. But I wrote it for strangers who needed the words, not for family who'd never valued them. I poured my pain into fiction that mattered, into stories that healed others because they'd first healed me. And if my family never understood what they had lost when they burned that first diary, when they looked through me instead of at me, when they loved me conditionally while loving Emma completely, well, that was their tragedy, not mine. I was done being invisible. But I'd learned that visibility didn't require their acknowledgement. It just required me showing up fully in my own life, writing my own story, being seen by people who actually wanted to look. On quiet nights, I sometimes thought about that girl lying in her bed, feverish and forgotten, believing she'd only ever been a rough draft. I wished I could tell her what I knew now, that she was already the real story, that her pain would become her purpose, that her invisibility would become her greatest insight, that learning to protect herself would teach her how to help others protect themselves too, that one day she'd write herself into existence so completely, so beautifully, that she'd never need anyone else's validation to prove she'd been real. Because she would be real. Absolutely, undeniably, unapologetically real. And that, more than any diary entry, more than any family acceptance, more than any external validation, that would be enough. That would be everything.